In this video, we're taking a look at the execution context dialog for a virtualized test scenario. And here in this example, we are looking at this scenario called cwxt sub c underscore management underscore scenario dot test scenario with the corresponding dot context file. And if we double click this context file, this will open up the execution context dialog and allow us to submit the underlying test scenario this way. There are other ways of opening the execution context and submitting a test scenario, but I'm using this one for now. We need to select the host connection if there hasn't been any connection pre-selected from previous executions. I'm selecting this LPAR CWCC. On the environment tab, that is the only change you might apply in normal situations. The logging info, the logging level info should not be changed, only when instructed to do so by the BMC support to analyze issues with total test would you modify the logging level. Next, we have the unit test tab. And as discussed elsewhere, I'm using context variables in the load library name to give me more flexibility and to dynamically build up the name of the load library containing my program that I want to test at runtime, especially when I want to use this scenario in a pipeline. This can come in handy. The other section of the unit test tab is related to the runner JCL. In this example and in this situation, we are loading the runner JCL from the central total test repository. Otherwise, the default would be the local total test configuration project. And if for whatever reasons I individually or this test scenario or this project in which the scenario resides requires deviating from the skeleton that is stored in the central repository, would we be able to point to a separate copy and a separate template of the runner JCL? Here, using this radio button and this drop down, we would point to the name of the file containing the runner JCL template, and switching to the options, in the optional JCL skeleton folder field on the options tab, we would point to the folder containing the file that we select on the unit test tab. This is only being used in very rare occasions when you need to deviate from the defaults provided by the repository or the central total test configuration project. Elsewhere, we have discussed already the job accounting information. So here, whatever I type here will be placed in the job card for the runner JCL to be used as the accounting information. The completion timeout, 600 seconds, i.e. 10 minutes, that's the time that we allow the test scenario to execute on the mainframe before we give up waiting for a result. 10 minutes should be more than enough to wait for the execution of that test, of such a test scenario. And we have discussed the high-level qualifier for temporary data sets. This is also stored in the central repository or in the local total test configuration project. If there is a need for an individual or for a specific test scenario to deviate from that centralized default, here is also an option to specify the qualifier. In this example and in this video, we're going to skip handling code coverage. There will be a separate video handling code coverage and the topic of code coverage. So the last thing that we're going to look at are the context variables. And in this example, I'm defining and setting two context variables. One is ISPW_level set to the value DEV1, and one is ISPW_app set to RxN3. And if we refer back to the unit test tab, this will tell us that the actual load library name that we're going to use for our test run will be salesub.rxn3.dev1.load. And as mentioned, this gives me high flexibility, especially when I need to execute this test scenario or this context file from within a pipeline.